Hi everybody, I'm Miss Lynn and I am a movement artist and we are going to do some movement today. In this episode of the Acadiana Center for the Arts virtual art studio, we explore the building blocks of making dances using shapes and movements to create different beginnings, middles, and endings. What does this mean? Have you ever seen a performance yourself? Well, no matter what sort of performance it is, whether it's dance or theater or a movie or a music performance, they all have beginnings, middles, and endings, right? Yeah. So if you want to put on a performance of your very own, you will need those things too. So let's get started. First, there are the beginnings. That's the first thing an audience will see. And so sometimes we call that the hook, okay? It's going to be something interesting that the audience is wanting to see more of. And it also kind of sets the scene. So that means it might introduce the people that you're going to see. It might introduce a certain amount of energy that you can expect for the rest of the performance, right? And it also might introduce the relationships between the people, the costumes. Maybe if there's a story, it introduces those ideas. So that is the beginning. The middle is when you develop those things. So you kind of keep going with that energy, or you show how those people relate, or you continue with the things that you started at the beginning, okay? And there's the ending. That is a natural way to end the piece. So at the end of your development, there should be a clear way of ending to let the audience know that it's done, that you don't have anything more to show them. And it should leave them feeling satisfied that they enjoyed the performance. Let's look at one example. You guys probably all know the story of Little Red Riding Hood, right? So, at the beginning of the story, who gets introduced? There are 3 characters right at the beginning that we get to know, right? I'm going to give you a little costuming so you can enjoy it. Here, who am I? Little Red Riding Hood gets introduced, right? And her mother. And let's see if we can do it like this. Her grandmother always wears like a little hat. Her grandmother. And one more character, the villain of the story. Who's that? We're going to make him look like this. The wolf, right? Okay, at the beginning of the story, the mother tells Little Red Riding Hood, I'd like you to take some treats to your grandmother. And be careful as you walk through the woods. Don't talk to any strangers. So right away, that's all we have. We have the characters, we know the story, how it begins. We know Red Riding Hood is supposed to be careful of something, right? So right away it starts the audience wondering, why is her mother telling her to be careful as she walks through the woods? And then the middle of the story, right? Where, as you know, who should come upon Red Riding Hood in the woods but Mr. Wolf? And you know that he's going to cause some trouble, don't you? So he starts asking Red Riding Hood all kinds of questions. And is she supposed to talk to him? No, but she does, doesn't she? So this is the development of the story. She does something she's not really supposed to do. And the wolf finds out from asking her a lot of questions that she's going to visit her grandmother. And he gives her the idea that she might want to pick flowers along the way. Why does he give her that idea? Because he wants her to take a long time to get to the grandmother's cottage, so he can get there first. Pretty sneaky, right? Well, Little Red Riding Hood is just a little girl. So she goes and picks flowers. She thinks it's a great idea. She's very trusting of Mr. Wolf. That's pretty much the middle. At the end of the story, there's a lot that happens, right? Little Red Riding Hood gets to the cottage. The wolf is already there, pretending to be her grandmother, right? Do you remember this? And then through a series of questions, she realizes that's not her grandmother. That is not her sweet old grandmother. It is really the wolf. And he eats everybody up. He eats the grandmother, he eats Little Red Riding Hood. Ugh, what a dramatic end, right? But luckily, that's not the very end. A new character gets introduced who solves the whole problem. You remember the woodsman who comes and chops open the wolf, and Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother spring out totally fine. They never got chewed or anything, they just got swallowed whole. So, very clear beginning, introducing all the characters and something to worry about. The middle, where all the action happens, right? Where the worrying thing actually happens. We have reason to be worried. And then the ending, where the worst thing of all happens, all that worry ends up in a thing that we definitely should have worried about, but a hero comes and saves the day. Okay, so keeping that as our model of a beginning, middle, and end, now we're going to look at some movement. There are so many ways to create a dance with a beginning, middle, and end, and I'm going to show you some of them, and you can decide which parts you want to use, how you want to put your dance together, all of that. Okay, next is some movement. So, let's start with beginnings. The first beginning I'm going to show you is very dramatic. It's when you start off stage, walk on stage, and take a pose. Okay? Let me show you a couple. That would be a great one if you're starting a dance about strength, right? All right, here's another. Wasn't that an interesting one? Didn't you want to see what came next? Okay, let's keep those two for now. Another kind of beginning is to come on from off stage, but moving, and to keep moving. Let me show you some of those too. So for that one, I came on moving and I kept moving, and we'll talk more about that when the middles come. Here's another. that one might have been about some soldiers, right? Or about some marching. One more kind of beginning is to start on stage and already be moving when the audience comes in. This kind of beginning is a little less dramatic, but it kind of gets the audience to think that this action would be happening even if they weren't there. Let me give you an example. It's kind of like you're dancing alone in your room and somebody happened to see you. It has that kind of feel to it. Let's stop there, and next we'll look at some middles. What I want you guys to know about middles for right now is that they are always made of shapes and moves, right? Always. Let's actually talk about endings next. And at the end of our video, we'll talk about middles because there are so many different kinds of middles to talk about. So here are some endings. Kind of the same as the beginning. It can be a dramatic ending where once the movement stops, there's a pose and then you walk off stage. Let me show you one of those. Of course, another kind of ending is to be moving and to move off stage. Sometimes people leap off stage or turn and go off stage. There are lots of ways to do it. Let's look at that. What if you saw a whole dance, lots and lots of movement, and then at the very end, whatever was happening, the mover moved off stage and then came back on for the bow, okay? That kind of leaves it like it ended in the middle of something, which is an interesting way to end a dance. And the last way to end is kind of like our last kind of beginning, where you're moving on stage, you never stop, but the lights come down. The lights turn out so the audience can't see you anymore. So again, it's like you're still moving, they're not able to see that part of the movement. That one's going to be hard to do because I can't turn the lights off in the studio, but you can imagine it. I'll say lights out, okay? Here we go. So let's say that you are moving whatever it is that you're doing, right? Lights out. And then the lights come back up and then you take your bow. So the audience has a sense that you kept moving even when they weren't watching. You had a lot still going on. Okay. Now we know a lot about possible beginnings and possible endings. Now we get to the meat, that's what I like to call it, the middle of your dance, right? Wow, why are you making a dance? What is interesting to you? This will totally help you decide what kind of beginning, what kind of ending, and hugely decide the middle of your dance, okay? So, I'm going to give you some ideas of what dances are sometimes about. Sometimes they're just about the music. And your dance is just an interpretation of the music. That's kind of easy. You just follow what the music makes you want to do. Sometimes your dance is about something that you love, right? Maybe it's about something in nature that you love. Maybe it's about how much you love rain and all the different ways that water appears on earth. And you go through and move all of those different kinds of water. Or maybe it's about the clouds or about birds, but something about nature that you love. That's possible. Sometimes a dance is about people, about maybe the relationships between people, how people treat each other, what kinds of things, how people behave in the world. That's another thing. And sometimes that turns into what we call a narrative. A narrative is a story, kind of like Red Riding Hood. It's a story that has a beginning, middle, and end, and tells a story. So if that's your desire, your middle could be that. Sometimes you just make a dance about how you want to express yourself, how your body wants to move. And that is completely okay too. Dances can be literally about anything. One last thing to think about is just sometimes someone wants to make a dance that's just beautiful to see. And that is also another way. So once you decide what it is you want to make your dance about, that will inspire your middle. How do we do it? Where do we start? Well, there are things called choreographic structures. What is that? That is kind of the how of putting movements together. A lot of times they're related to a pattern. One pattern we see a lot is called A, B, A. Did you see how A was a different shape from B, right? And then went back to A? That is one way to think about a piece. So there's an A, and whatever you do, you always come back to A. There's something I do with my students that I'm going to call A, B, A, C, A, D. So it always comes back to A. Let me show you that. We were learning about shapes in movement. And so what we did is we made straight shapes and then curved shapes. Back to straight, crooked shapes, back to straight, and then twisty shapes. Let me show you that just so you have it in mind. And that pattern can go with a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be shapes, right? Could be movements, could be feelings, could be emotions, could be a lot of things. But let me show you our ABA pattern shape dance, where the pattern is always coming back to that straight in between the other shapes. Here we go. Something straight, something curved, something different that's straight, crooked, 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 something different that's straight, and a twist. Let's try that again. Did you notice when I said the shape words, we were using all of our body parts to make those shapes? When I say straight, we have straight arms, straight legs, a straight torso, and a straight head, like that. When I say curved, I curved everything. Curved my arms, my torso, my legs, my head. You can try it. And then I came back to straight. Straight arms, straight torso, straight legs, straight head. And from here we went to crooked. So crooked is when you bend your elbows, your knees, your torso, and your head. And then we went to straight again. Straight arms, straight legs, straight torso, straight head. And then we twisted everything. Twisted arms, torso, legs, and head. Right? All twisted up. Okay, you want to try this middle with me? Show me something where everything is straight and where everything is curved and where everything is straight, where everything goes crooked, 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 Everything is straight another way. And twisting everything around. Right? Your twist might have looked like this. I don't know. You can do your own dance. That is one kind of middle. A, B, A, C, A, D, A. You could keep going, right? And maybe you would end on A, something straight. That is one way to make a middle. One more totally different way to do a middle is to not focus on shapes, but to focus on movements. And there's a structure called ABC structure, where you have 3 ideas and you explore first one, then the other, then the last one. And a lot of times this works with words as your inspiration. So today what I could show you is we can use verbs. You guys know what verbs are? Those are our action words. Anytime you're doing something, it's a verb. I am talking, right? So the verb is talk. I am wiggling. The verb is wiggle. I am nodding. The verb is nod. I am waving. The verb is wave. I wave at you. I nod at you. I wiggle at you. I talk to you, right? So let's think of 3 interesting words that would be fun to explore. I came up with, and remember these are verbs, right? Action words. I came up with wiggle, soar, and slink. I was actually inspired by some animals. So I thought of wiggle as kind of snaky movement. If you were a snake, you would wriggle or wiggle. My second one was to soar. Who do we know that soars into the air? All kinds of birds, right? I was thinking of an owl soaring. And then the last one, slink, that came from the walk of a tiger or a cat, how they slink around, okay? So you can try this with me. We can develop movement to wiggle, to soar, and to slink. Let's try it. This would be a different kind of middle. Let's start with wiggling. You could think of wiggling different body parts. You might start by wiggling shoulders, and then wiggling elbows, and then wiggling hips and knees, and come all the way up, and do a high wiggle, maybe wiggle all around. It's a wiggling dance, so we're wiggling everywhere. Can you wiggle? Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And then we do something totally different. We are soaring. Soaring and soaring around the stage. Soar with me, maybe you swoop down and soar high. But that is a whole different kind of movement. And then our last one, slinking. Think of how a tiger moves. It's kind of a slow motion wiggle as they walk through the jungle, being sneaky. Right, here we go, sneaking, slinking through the jungle. And that could be the middle of an ABC dance based on verbs. Neat. So, I think it would be really fun to take those 2 ideas, give them a beginning and give them an end that makes sense, and we'll put them both together and show them to each other, okay? I'm so excited. What would be a good beginning for our shape dance? I feel like that's one where we should walk on stage, take a shape, and then start. And we can end the same way, posing, ending in a shape, walking off stage. Let's try that one. Here we go. And take a bow with me. That was awesome. Okay, let's try our other one. For this one, I feel like we should come on stage moving, move our 3 verbs, and then go off stage moving too. So remember, these were wriggling for the snake, soaring for the owl, and slinking like a tiger. Here we go, do it with me. And you can take a bow with me right there. Great job, you guys. And there you have it. You guys now have a lot of ways to make beginnings, middles, and ends. Go out there and make dances. You might want to keep a journal. And when you have a great idea for a dance, write it down. And that way you can keep track of what beginnings you're going to use, what kind of middles, what kind of ends, and you can put things together in your notebook before you try it with your whole body. Guys, I loved working with you today. Again, I'm Miss Lynn. I wish you the best, and please come back and see us again. These videos are online for your use and enjoyment anytime you want. Bye, everybody.